Your podcast is a powerful tool that serves your audience and your business. But how do you manage it all, bring in new listeners, and convert those listeners into customers? That's what this show is all about. Welcome to Podcasting for Educators. I'm Sarah Whitaker, classroom teacher turned podcast manager, and I'm here to help you get the most out of your show, all while making an impact on other educators. All right, back to school season is here. And if you're anything like me, maybe the schools around you started at the beginning of August. So this season has already been here for a while. And if your podcast is created for some sort of educator like teachers, school counselors, speech pathologists, any kind of specialist, it's possible that you may see some changes in your downloads and not always for the best, unfortunately, during this season. And I'm going to give a quick disclaimer that what I'm talking about in this episode is what I have seen on average, but of course, every single show is different. So it's completely possible that you will not see these same trends. Anyway, the education space sees a lot different stat trends than other niches in the online space. For example, for lots of podcasts, downloads drop during the summer because people are taking time off, their audience is on vacation, and they're out of their normal routine, so they're not always listening to as many podcasts during the summer. But in the education space, downloads tend to spike during the summer because teachers and other professionals have a little bit of time to breathe. And even if they are spending their time relaxing, which I hope that they are, they often still crave catching up on professional development kind of content that is going to help them in the upcoming school year. So you might be somebody who serves educators, who has a podcast for educators, and hopefully you've seen your downloads do well this summer. But then when August and September hits, specifically late August to September, what happens? Teachers are in full survival mode. They've got classrooms to set up. They've got that never-ending back-to-school professional development that is often unnecessary, but that is a totally different story. They've got open house and back to school night, and they're working on getting to know their students, building their rules and their routines and community in their classroom. The list goes on and on and on. I know I remember the chaos and the exhaustion of back to school time, and I know a lot of you are right in the thick of it right now. You and maybe your ideal audience might be looking for done-for-you type of resources, like things that can be found on Teachers Pay Teachers, but you're not necessarily looking to consume more content because your brain is like on overload during back to school time. So what could this mean for your downloads? You might see a drop in your downloads during these months, or things might just stay kind of stagnant. So maybe you've seen some growth over the last few months, and then in August, September, maybe also into October, you're kind of just seeing things are flatlines. They're not necessarily dropping, but they're also not growing at the rate that you were previously. If you are listening to this and you are nodding your head, yes, this is happening to you. You are logging in to look at your stats and they're not great. Well, do not freak out. Keep on doing what you're doing. If you see a drop in your downloads, it doesn't mean that your content isn't resonating with your listeners or that you're doing anything wrong by any means. Just remember who your audience is and where they are right now. They're in a very, very busy season. And instead of just telling you, don't freak out, keep doing what you're doing, let's talk about some things that you can actually do. Number one, pay attention to your audience during this time. And what I mean by this is like if they're responding to any of your emails or watching them on social media, paying attention to the things that they're posting on their Instagram stories or in your Facebook groups. They are likely talking about their pain points during this time. They might be venting about any frustrations or exhaustion that they're experiencing. Maybe they're talking about how they have a huge caseload this year, or their classroom is extremely overcrowded, or they don't have the resources that they need, or they've got parents who are already constantly emailing them. These are all great things to pay attention to and things that will help you drive your content decisions for the upcoming months. Because if you can identify these problems, these very specific and in the moment problems that your audience is facing, then that is totally something that you could address on your podcast and create some episodes around. Second thing I would do during this back to school time is for these episodes that you are putting out during these months, try and keep them fairly simple, to the point. Give your listeners a quick win in your episodes. And really, I talk about quick wins a lot. I think that you should always have a quick win in all of your episodes. But during this particular time, really being intentional about the purpose of these episodes. What is something that they can walk away with at the end of the episode? And that might be something that you're teaching them, one thing that you are teaching them that they can go and implement. Or maybe you're doing some sort of inspirational episode and they can leave that episode feeling inspired and motivated and ready to take on the next day. Because again, this time of year, while it can be very exciting, it's also so draining. So I want you to really picture the people that you are speaking to. Picture them getting into their car after a very long day. What can you provide for them if they push play on your podcast that will help them to keep going? The other thing that you can do if you see your downloads dropping at all during this time is to do maybe a little bit more promotion than you usually do on your episodes. Depending on who your specific audience is, they might not be on their phones or their computers as much during the day as they were during the summer months. So can you get on your Instagram stories a few more times than usual? Can you make sure that you get that weekly newsletter sent out so that they are still being alerted that there's a new podcast episode and they can just have those additional reminders in case they want to tune in? If during any of these back to school months you are seeing that drop, a good thing to do is to send out kind of a recap of all of your August episodes and then another recap of all of your September episodes. So maybe somebody who normally listens to your podcast has just been knee deep in back to school stuff and they haven't been able to listen for the past few weeks. Well, you want to stay top of mind. So at the end of the month, send out an email with links that's super accessible. All they have to do is click, hey, here's all of my episodes from August, the title, a little, maybe like a 1 or 2 sentence description, so that people can be reminded, oh, shoot, I have these episodes to catch up on from my favorite podcast that I haven't been able to listen to this month. That's one of the best things about podcasting. Most of your content is going to be evergreen and people can go back and listen at any time. Just because you have maybe less downloads per episode than usual the week that your episodes air, it doesn't mean that it won't accumulate attention over time. Again, remember where your audience is at this specific time of year. Now, maybe this back to school season won't affect you and your podcast downloads at all. In fact, maybe you're going to see growth during this time, and that's amazing. So if that's you, then kudos, congratulations. This doesn't really apply to you right now, but it might at another point in the year. Most of all, this conversation is to remind us of a few things. Number one, it's a reminder that you should be tracking and paying attention to your downloads throughout the year consistently. I like to go in and update downloads monthly. As the months go by, you will continue to accumulate data. You're going to start to see trends with your downloads. And all of this information is information that will help you with your content planning for the future. And if you want to learn a little bit more about specifically which stats you should be tracking, you can check out episode 15 because I do kind of a deep dive into tracking your stats. Number two, this is a good reminder to air any kind of helpful back to school specific content during the summer so that your audience has the mental capacity to consume it and to prepare any kind of strategies or resources that you're sharing before they actually go back to school. So again, that kind of goes into making sure that you're always being really intentional with your episode planning. I am a firm believer that you do not have to have your podcast episodes batched out months ahead of time, but I do think that you should have your content ideas batched out ahead of time, because that's when strategy comes into play, and that's how you can be really intentional about the content that you're putting out in your episodes. And then number 3, this episode is also just a reminder that you're going to have ups and downs when it comes to your podcast growth. If you have a quote unquote bad month or 2, don't stress. It's so easy for all of us, I've been guilty of this too, is to have one lower month or bad month, whatever you want to call it, or maybe even a few bad months, and you're just like throwing your hands in the air, wanting to burn everything down, quit it all, quit the podcast. But I really encourage you to keep going and to keep it fun. All right, this was a pretty quick, short and sweet episode, but I thought that it was important to have this conversation. If you are somebody who is seeing a drop or a flat line in your downloads, I would love to hear from you and see if this episode was helpful for you. And of course, as always, you're welcome to send me a message on Instagram at Podcasting for Educators and let me know of any questions that you have after listening. That is all for today, my friends. I will catch you here next week. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. To keep this conversation going, connect with me on Instagram at Podcasting for Educators. I'm always looking for an excuse to talk about podcasting. If you're looking for support in launching, managing, or growing your podcast, check out my online course, the Podcasting for Educators Prep School, at podcastingforeducators.com/prep school. I'll see you here next time.